You don't get to decide what side of the road you drive on. Does that bug you? That you can't just sort of choose to drive on whatever side of the road you want? It's your car. You paid for it with your own money. And you also pay your motor tax, probably. When they tell us the motor taxes are paying for roads and maintenance, why can't you just drive on the other side? Why can't everyone just decide for themselves which side to drive on? Why is there all this shouting and beeping every time I exercise my right to drive on the other side of the road that I paid for? I've even been accused of endangering the lives of others. Can you believe that? Mind your own business, buddy. Anyway, that's how I feel about anti-mask, anti-vaxxers. Not like you. Not like you. Hey everybody, I hope you like the new intro, ident, whatever you call it. It's very rough, I know it. It took me way too long. So you can only imagine the versions that I have dragged to the recycle bin. I had like 15 goes at it, and that's the best I can do, so I am done. And you know what they say anyway, doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result is the very definition of practice. Anyway, for a certain kind of person, antisocial, I have since learned that the correct term is asocial and antisocial means something else, but I like antisocial has a better snap to it, doesn't it? As a word, antisocial, do. Asocial sounds a bit technical, I don't know. Anyway, for a certain kind of person whose living space is perfectly acceptable, this coronavirus thing might be the best thing that could have happened. Now, I don't like saying it out loud because it's been so awful for so many people, and I guess if you're the kind of person who likes going out to the pub and enjoying alcoholic drugs with your friends, or you live in a cramped apartment in the middle of a block of a city, then the lockdown season was not good for you. But as they say, I have to be authentic to my own experience. I'm not trying to upset anyone. I can't pretend to be miserable just because lots of other people are. I get that I'm very lucky in many ways, but I have certainly contributed nothing at all to the fact that I'm asocial, I guess. And I've contributed nothing to the fact that I have a nice house to live in and all my books. That's all just, I'm not taking any of that for granted. I'm very grateful for all of that. But for everybody else, we're getting to the end of it. Yay. They tell us we're getting to the end of this. They tell us we're going to be out of it by October 22. Yeah, and I suppose since then our restrictions have been, like the anti-constipation stuff they keep selling on television ads, the restrictions have been easing gently and predictably, although we would all probably much prefer if the restrictions were lifted violently and immediately. Again, like constipation. So from a not-so-normal summer to a normal autumn. My normal autumn will be staying inside and keeping away from people, not just because I'm asocial, but I find any sort of engagement with other humans emotionally and physically draining. But because the sunshine gives me migraines. Sunshine is one of the triggers, along with chocolate and mushrooms and Piers Morgan. See, that's a lie. All of that was a lie. The only trigger I've definitely identified trigger is sunshine. I'm fine with chocolate and mushrooms. Well, I can't have chocolate because there's sugar in it, but I should be alright with mushrooms. Anyway, I was so infected with this lockdown thing that I made bread. I mean, I was only a year behind the curve, as per usual. I'm the opposite of a hipster. I only get into things long after they become fashionable. Although I still haven't seen Titanic. The movie. Or I guess maybe anything else that the word Titanic could refer to. I don't want to go, that's not, just, no. I've never seen The Lion King either. I've never seen The Lion King, and that seems to horrify everyone else, I guess, who was left over from being horrified that I've never seen Titanic. I do like to annoy the Titanic people by telling them I know how it ends. They don't seem to like that. I have no idea what happens in The Lion King, but anytime somebody tries to explain it, it sounds like Hamlet, minus, the emotional depth and plus songs. So I guess if you've seen The Lion King, but you want it done properly, like where people don't burst out into song in the middle of it, you can join us in the grown-ups corner and have a go at Hamlet. So I did make bread. I'd never made bread before, and I've only done it once since. I was very impressed with myself because it looked and it smelled like real bread. But that was kind of where it ended. I mean, I was also impressed because I managed to get it out of the tin without breaking it. But then I tried to cut it, and it was the consistency of leather, and it tasted very much like hot, wet, yeasty flour, which I know kind of is what bread is, but it shouldn't have tasted like that. Bread, I guess, is the classic example of something which should be more than the sum of its parts. Anyway, this isn't a bread thing. I don't care about bread. Thing is, what have we learned from COVID? This hopefully will be the last COVID podcast, or whatever you call these things. I don't know. I've heard so many podcasts now that calling this thing a podcast seems dramatically it seems like overselling this thing, whatever it is. It's just me talking into a microphone. But I'm going to call it a podcast because it's mine, and I can call it a giraffe if I want. So hopefully this will be the last of the coronavirus-themed giraffes. What have we learned? What have we learned? In the real world, nothing. But let's live in a world where we may have learned things from this coronavirus, COVID rolling lockdown business. Number 1, I made a list. I have a list in front of me. I am reading this bit. Number 1, healthcare needs to be public. The private sector is neither incentivized nor equipped to effectively handle a public health crisis. All health is public. If it takes a global pandemic to snap that into a sharper focus, then that's fine. Because they don't, viruses and things don't seem to respect private or public differences. Number 2, lots of jobs can be done perfectly well from home, apparently. And I pity any company, and by pity I mean laugh at, who tries to convince people to get back into those little white boxes that you see on the television, to do typing all day, and to hang around the water cooler talking about yesterday's episode of a program that people watch. I don't know. Football match, try that. Oh, yes, okay. This has nothing to do with anything, but if you're with people and they insist on discussing yesterday's game, you can say things like, hey, it was very much a game of two halves, and people will just nod along, go, yeah, you're not a complete loser. Or you can say things like, oh, it could have gone either way, but the gulf in class showed towards the end. Like that. And that again sounds like you watched it. I know I've been trying out a number of different phrases, and some of them work and some of them don't. Yeah, some of the most important, number 3, some of the most important people in the country are also some of the worst paid. People at all stages of the food supply chain are essential, and people like nurses. I don't know if that's something we learned or if we intend to do anything about that. But let's not take for granted the food supply chain, which in England right now, the food supply chain is being threatened not by the global lockdown, but by Brexit, which is very much a condition of their own making. Number 4, and we live in a society, not an economy, which is going to come as news to a lot of people who think you can make social policy as if it was an economy. But we are apparently, and presumably always were, a bunch of people united by a network of people stuff, and we're not just piles of money. We're not just liabilities and assets to be moved around a map. Number 5, physical touch is important to our species. Not me, obviously, because I'm different. But in general, virtual meetings and conversations are fine, but we are a social species, which is why being asocial is such a pain in the ass. We're a social species. We need to be able to touch each other. We, in the sense of everybody but me. Some languages have a word for we, but not you. And it just means that. And they have a word for we, but not me. I like that. English could do with that. Number 6, mental health is real. It's a real thing, and we need to start treating it properly. This is something I think people are kind of getting on board with anyway. But it's nice that this thing snapped it into focus again. And mental health is a real thing that people really have to worry about. After the Vietnam War, more US soldiers died from suicide than were killed in the combat. Taking care of yourself is not... I don't know, what would you... It's not like an indulgence. Taking care of yourself is a good idea. And loneliness can hurt. Bad. Being isolated from other people can hurt you like being kicked in the balls. Not me, obviously, because I'm asocial. I want to be on my own all the time. Number 7. Those on lower incomes have worse outcomes in every metric. People at the bottom of the income chain have disproportionately experienced the coronavirus thing. And they've lost jobs in enormous disproportion. And over again, more than race or gender or anything else, income can be identified with the worst outcomes in all these metrics. So I'm going to leave it as an exercise to you to figure out how to deal with that. Number 8 is vaccines work. Now we knew this already. There was there's a guy called Andrew Wakefield, and he kicked off a whole that the measles and mumps vaccine causes autism, which turned out to be factually incorrect, as well as mildly insulting for people who have autism. So there was a movement already kicking off, but man, these guys got loud during the coronavirus, but they work. The vaccines work. And as soon as the vaccine program started taking off in every country, infection rates dropped off a cliff. Like with the infection rates we're seeing now, we would have seen a lot more people in hospital. A lot. If it wasn't for the vaccine rollout. Number 9 is science is not right about everything all the time, but it's the best we have, because our understanding of reality is a series of best guesses. And again, this is scary for people who want definite answers all the time, like, yes, there is a Santa Claus, and so on. Definite answers tend to be incorrect, no matter what they are. Yeah, science is not right about everything all the time. And if you remember at the start of this thing, science was telling us, the best science they had was telling us things that they had to reverse on. Like when we started out, we were washing down our milk cartons, and when it turns out things on surfaces aren't a vector for transmission of this thing at all. You have to be talking to somebody face to face for a while, or in a locked room with them where the things don't circulate much. Like, I assume the common cold is transmitted in a very similar fashion. But yeah, they changed their minds about a bunch of stuff. Well, it doesn't mean that science is a bad idea. It's a series of best guesses using the evidence we have. It's very odd to see people saying, oh look, science got it wrong. Well, yeah, it did. But it's also the best machine we have for getting it right. And they will continue to, keep working that machine and hone down a better and better understanding of everything. Number 10, we are now, at least we in developed countries, are now dependent on technology. Can you imagine what this pandemic would have been like without technology? Just get a bit of picture in your head there about what it would have been like without cell phone networks, without internet. Holy hand grenade. There's no going back. Good news is that all the technology is only going to get cheaper and faster. All the indications we have are that it's only going to get cheaper and faster. Although, I guess a problem looming on the landscape now is these server centers that are sucking up so much energy. I saw a story once that said like a newspaper story, and it said that all the servers that had to be built and operated just to operate the cryptocurrency like Bitcoin and so on, they cancel out all the energy savings that we've had from other things. So Bitcoin is going to Well, I don't know if this it strikes me that the Bitcoin thing is just a phase that will eventually peter out at some point or evolve into something else. But also, I think that the server technology, like all computer technology, will get faster and cheaper over time and smaller. And eventually the servers will be smaller and smaller, and they'll take up less and less energy to use because they'll be more and more efficient, just like everything. Like I'm talking into a machine now, my mobile telephone, my cell phone, and this machine here is more powerful than the most complicated machine that they had in 1950, which would have been the size of a room. This can do many millions things faster and better than that machine, and it's the size of a... I'm trying to think of... I mean, I know you know what a mobile phone is, but I felt like I should come up with something interesting. The size of a CD, no. The size of a cassette tape. The kids don't know what a cassette tape is. When I was a lad, we had cassette tapes that we would play music on. Yeah. We're now dependent on technology, but that might be fine, because there's no going back. We just got to make sure that it's like... we have to make sure that governments understand that it's essential infrastructure now, like roads. It's not a luxury. It needs to be provided to people, and it needs to be maintained as if it was part of the road network. Number 11. Common use urban spaces with proper facilities are essential for the functioning of a city. The idea of a social space where you can get outside and enjoy being active in the public, those things are going to become increasingly important, and of course they have to be free. It doesn't really work if leaving the house costs me money. There has to be a public space that's not tied into me buying something. I think people are discovering this themselves again more and more. Like, there was certainly a lot of people out walking along the river and cycling on the roads and so on during this. It's nice to see it. Not me, obviously, because I don't leave the house. But I get the philosophy is good. Of course, in Ireland we have a weather problem, I guess, because it's always going to be raining. I've seen other countries where people just go outside and stay there for hours. They don't worry about it. They can program having barbecues a month in advance and there's no problem. But we can work on something. Number 12, our destruction of the natural environment is having unexpected consequences. Many diseases, including COVID-19 and Ebola. Remember Ebola? Remember Ebola was the big thing. Ebola kills people so quickly that it's never going to be a pandemic because they're just dead. They don't have time to transmit. Anyway, many diseases, including COVID-19 and Ebola, can be traced to changing land use, which brings humans into contact with animals, which for some reason appears to be bats a lot of the time. And they would never meet these otherwise, or if they were to meet these animals, it would happen over such a gradual period that all the populations would have time to adapt to each other and it wouldn't result in these ridiculous disease expansions. And that's the destruction of the natural environment. Apart from all the expected consequences, there are unexpected consequences. Namely, this global pandemic we're having. Number 13. Jesus, this is a long list. I'm not going to be... Don't worry, it's not that long. Hang on. 15. There's 15. Yeah, we're on 13 out of 15. Don't worry, everything's fine. Misinformation spread on social media can kill people. Yeah, it doesn't just turn over elections. It can actually kill people. There's people who died in hospital while not believing the thing that they died of exists. And those people who are on these ridiculous Facebook groups or whatever else groups, presumably, even if they didn't get affected by the disease at all, may have and probably did pass it on to people who would be affected by it. Misinformation spread on social media is not an academic thing, it's an existential thing. Like, I talk to people who are not as left-wing as me, which is almost everybody, and sometimes I get the impression from them that we're talking about things like, issues, important issues of the day, things like whatever's hot, like trans people and so on. And I think a lot of them talk about it, to me, like it's an academic issue where they have to win a debate by making a better point. And I mean, okay, like I like doing that. But that's a little bit Ben Shapiro for me, because presumably for people who are trans, it's not so much an academic debate as an existential debate. And I don't think these right-wing people having these discussions understand that they're talking to somebody who, not me obviously, but I'm trying to understand, for whom it is an existential issue. And then it becomes a different discussion. Then things like, oh, I'm just asking questions, or I'm just playing devil's advocate, that's all acts of violence if it's an existential discussion to you, But anyway. Number 14. A lot more of our everyday normal lives runs on the honor system than we could have realized. Things people just sort of do because they know they more or less probably should. Our entire society and, the economy, I don't know how much the economy works in the honor system, but I'm going to guess quite a lot of it. A lot more than the people who cook up economic theory. Our entire society would fall apart without the honor system. The honor system being like policing yourself, because it makes sense. 15. There are people who will believe the most ridiculous things as long as it means they don't have to undergo the mildest of inconveniences to protect other people. And this goes all across the board, not just to do with coronavirus. I know people who are reluctant to get into the electric car thing because I told them it takes 20 minutes to refill at a gas station, or an electric gas station, a charger, I guess you'd call it. And they just want to spend 3 minutes recharging their tank with petrol. And it's just, I don't know, it's such a small-minded thing to worry about. But we're all going to have to get used to being slightly inconvenienced for the greater good. And this came out in the coronavirus. It's a right-wing thing. I don't know how to explain that you should care about other people. I don't know how to do that. That it's not just you living on your own, not affecting or affected by anybody else. That's not how it works. There's people who say they die for their country, but they don't want to wear a mask. Maybe it's easier to conceptualize some grand gesture than to undergo a series of low-level maintenance things. Like, I have diabetes, right? As you probably know if you're listening to this. I prefer to do one grand gesture. It would be great if I could just stop eating everything for a week, right? And I'd be wrecked, of course, at the end of it. But I'd still prefer to do that than to have to bother with a series of tiny, stupid maintenance issues that are involved in making sure I keep this thing under control. I have to look at packets of things and see how much sugar is in it. Oh, it's just a pain. I'd much prefer to go through one grand gesture. That's not the world I live in. It's not the world you live in either. Get used to it. What I'm saying is just wear a mask, if that's the public advice, right? And apparently on October 22, the public advice is we don't have to wear a mask anymore, and then we can all go to a no-mask party when it's over, okay? Alright. I will not be going. Obviously, I won't be going, but I still want to be invited. Alright, that's it. That's Coronavirus 3. Lessons we have learned. And I'll be back at some point in the future with a more regular, non-coronavirus related one of these things, which I'm hesitant to call a podcast because it's overselling it. As ever, if you liked this, please tell your friends. And if you hated it, please tell everyone you know. And I am out. Not like you.